This week we're testing another wagon. This is the 2020 Subaru Outback. It is the Onyx Edition XT. It's actually the cheapest way to get into the turbocharged 2.4 liter boxer 4-cylinder. That's made it to a CVT, Subaru's linear-tronic continuously variable transmission. And they've done some blacked out treatment to a lot of different parts of this car. The tail lights, the bumper trim, some of the badges are blacked out. I think it looks pretty good, actually. This is a decent looking wagon. You get all the ground clearance and sometimes more ground clearance than a lot of SUVs at 8.7 inches. This actually has more ride height than my Lexus GX 460, which is pretty impressive. So you've got some off-road chops. If you like wagons, this is a great alternative to something like the Ascent. And if you don't need 7 seats, pretty good options. I like some of the design touches on this interior. You get this cool green stitching, and this, it's not quite leather, but it's kind of like a leather-like material. It feels like vinyl. It's actually very nice. It's soft to the touch. It feels very durable. It's quite nice. I wouldn't mind putting the dog back here. This interior is quite spacious as well. Plenty of room. You get 2.1 amp USB chargers, heated seats in the rear. Subaru's been doing good things with their interior design lately, and their materials aren't far off either. Honestly, I'm having a little bit of trouble telling this Subaru Outback, telling whether this is a new one compared to the last generation. They haven't changed much, and that may be a good thing because it's a pretty winning formula for them. There's a ton of space. This is easy to pull out here. I mean, all of this is just, it's very easy to use this car however you need it. There's just a ton of cargo space back there. You can throw a bike back there very easily. You could even sleep in the back. You get a couple of neat little grocery bag holders here, some cargo space here. Underneath we have a spare tire. Looks like a full-size 225/60/18. Very useful with an all-wheel drive vehicle that you may take off-road. You can even adjust the height of the backrest in the rear seats. So this 2.4 liter turbocharged boxer engine makes 260 horsepower, and it actually looks like an engine. I love that. Top mounted intercooler. Everything is easily accessible. Functional vents. Ready for all of your adventures. So there are some pros and cons to this Outback. I want to talk about that in this video. The first thing I noticed, and I got a little bit nervous about, was this infotainment when I first got into this. Let's see if we can find a shady spot so we can see the screen a little bit better. Alright, that's better. So, a little bit of a mixed bag. I like some things that they've done here. They've made buttons for the climate control temperature, which is something that you would be adjusting a lot. And the climate control itself is pretty usable. I wish still there's no supplement for real physical buttons and knobs. This screen always stays here all the time, so they could have just put knobs and buttons there, but that's okay. I don't like how small Apple CarPlay is. It's really difficult to press things that you want to press at speed. I'll find myself having to try 2 or 3 attempts to stop my navigation on Waze or do various tasks. And that goes into my second complaint, is that this touchscreen is really laggy and not very responsive. And the logic for where you press on the screen and what gets pushed isn't very good. To me, this doesn't feel like a system that is production ready. This is not contemporary touch technology. Why can't we have, the same level of responsiveness that we have on our phones and mobile devices that we've had for the last 10 years in our cars? Anyway, not just Subaru is guilty of this. A lot of manufacturers are guilty of this. But in something that costs $35,000, that is your vehicle where responsiveness is key, why is that not the case? It's very frustrating. So I don't know if there's a way you cannot get this big touchscreen. This is listed as an option on this car, but literally every single car that I looked up online has this touchscreen. So it seems like they're pretty much coming in all the Outbacks. Maybe a base model wouldn't have it. Anyway, it's not very good. There's a lot of menus for things that should really be buttons. Auto vehicle hold, that should be a button. Traction control should be a button. Blind spot monitoring should be a button. Auto start, stop, start, that should definitely be a button right here because it's not a very good system. So there's another thing too, is I experienced this with the Subaru Ascent that I had a couple weeks ago. Cruise control is always beeping and bonging away at you. In standard form from the factory, this car is making all sorts of beeps and bongs and noises, commenting on your driving, and it's incredibly distracting. Luckily, there's a way to turn some of it off, but the cruise control beeping, there isn't a way. We'll show you guys that once we get on the road. So, few complaints out of the way initially. Otherwise, though, these are gripes. They're not deal breakers, but it's stuff that Subaru could get right, and they would have a nearly perfect car. There's some cool things here on the interior, like there's a hole in the bottom of this cup holder for who knows what, but you can put your phone in there and it doesn't bend the charger at the base. Cool stuff. Intelligently thought of and designed. And all of these storage compartments, hallelujah, they're grippy. Things aren't going to move around in them or rattle around, which is fantastic. Subaru gets it. We have a traditional shifter. Nothing fancy here. This is the way it should be. A lot of buttons on the steering wheel, a lot of controls. You have paddle shifters. Ergonomics in this car are great, besides what's hidden in the touch display here. I have nice visibility too. Little place to put my sunglasses. That slides. This Outback does have quite a bit going for it. It's reasonably efficient. It's super fast with this turbo boxer engine. It gets about 30 miles to the gallon on the highway, 23 in the city. This week I've been averaging about between 25 to 27 depending on where I'm driving. When you're just driving around normally, this CVT is actually pretty good. It's relatively smooth, it's pretty responsive. You get a decent amount of acceleration without the revs going too high. It's when you start to hustle a little bit more where this car kind of lacks some refinement and smoothness. But it's wicked fast. It's kind of interesting. It almost feels a little bit overpowered when you factor in like the softness of the suspension and the overall driving character of this car. You floor this thing and you get going, and with how cushy the ride is and how high the ride height is, you feel like, wow, going way faster than I should. It is nice though for passing on back roads, and if you just want a little bit of extra power, this Onyx edition is actually a pretty cool way to go in the Outback lineup. Personally, I'd probably be more inclined to swing for a base model or a lower trim on this, just because you get all the good stuff and you might be able to avoid the infotainment. Off-road on bumpy surfaces, the suspension soaks up all the bumps, it rides really well, you have a ton of ground clearance, so you almost don't really have to worry about bottoming out in off-road scenarios. In most stuff, you're going to be fine. You don't really have a whole lot to worry about. And that's great if you live in an area with a lot of snow, or you're regularly going up mountain passes or access roads to get to places. This is going to be a great car that has vehicle-like driving dynamics without being a big SUV. You do get an 8-speed simulated shifting CVT, so you can switch it over into manual mode. It'll blip the shifts. Good for when you're going down a mountain or on a back road. Adds a little bit of a sporty character to this Outback. And in manual shifting mode, it works great. It actually responds when you ask it to. Does quite a good job. Driving this car, you kind of get the feeling that you can just kind of charge over just about everything, and you'll get through it. The ride quality, going over harsh bumps, you're never cringing and wincing in pain. There are some rattles in the cabin. I'm getting a dash rattle this week, and going over bumps, it's not the quietest interior. Let's hustle this thing around some corners here. It's properly quick, and it knows when you're driving it spiritedly, because it'll hold the revs like it's in sport mode. Once you get on the highway, it's pretty quiet, which is nice to see Subaru doing some NVH work. This cruise control is incredibly easy to set. You can change your following distance very quickly with the press of a button here. The only thing is, it's always beeping at you. Every time a car pulls out in front of you or exceeds the range from the radar, you get a beep. And you can lower the volume of those beeps. There you go. See, there it is again. But you can't, I haven't found a way to turn them off. And I think over, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, 100,000 miles, the beeps would gradually drive you insane. So, something to consider when you buy your Subaru Outback, or any modern Subaru with this EyeSight system. The sound system isn't bad. We'll do a sound test at the end of this video. It actually sounds pretty good. It's got a lot of different settings that you can go in and configure. It is a little bass heavy, but for what you're paying, for what you're getting, it's not horrible. This car does so many things really, really well, and Subaru's getting a lot right with this new generation of products. There are just some areas that they need to iron out, and they're going to have some really, really solid cars here soon. The infotainment, that's as close to a deal breaker as I can come up with. I think, honestly, they've gotten a lot right. Some big complaints. The climate control is actually pretty good. They have volume and tune knobs. Great win there. And it's easy to change volume and tracks here on the steering wheel too. Redundant systems. There's a lot of good information here. We no longer have multiple displays showing information and time and things, and it's all pretty well organized. I can even see my tire pressure, how much fuel I've saved by driving efficiently. Let's show you guys another cruise control pass here. I like that you can skip 5-mile-an-hour increments by pressing the button once, and it'll hold. If you hold the cruise control, it'll skip by 1-mile-an-hour increments. It seems to be pretty responsive, passing other vehicles. And on the highway, this 260 horsepower, it feels good. It feels very healthy. Let's go into vehicle settings and turn on driving assistance, lane departure. So this is a pretty intrusive system. It gives you a little bit of a bump from the steering. It's hard to kind of drive without the car always intervening. So I've turned it off. You do get a little bit of a beep too if you're excessively weaving, but it kind of makes you look like you're drunk when you're driving. Some systems, like Mazda's, work pretty in the background and only kind of give you a little bit of a nudge when you're excessively straying from the lane. I'll just turn that off. Luckily it stays off though once you've turned it off. You don't have to reset it every time you start up the car, unlike the start-stop system. I had a lot of complaints about the Subaru Ascent with the throttle linearity and the programming, and this is much better. This is much more linear of a throttle. It still gets a little bit sensitive beyond about 50% or so, but it's pretty good. And we have a decent amount of mechanical grip here on this corner. I can feel the body roll, I can feel the suspension moving around, but overall, nice levels of mechanical grip, no complaints there. Let's put steering assist into active. And this is a pretty decent system too. If you need to go in and fiddle through 5 menus to change a setting in your infotainment, you can turn this on and it'll keep you pretty well centered. It's a button, it's easy to access, it's very, very quick to use. Something that I've been finding myself using a lot if I need to just kind of do something in here for a second. I do find myself using cruise control quite a bit in this car because the throttle it's a little bit difficult to modulate your speed sometimes just because of the nature of the CVT, and you know, modern drive-by-wire throttles don't have a lot of feedback. So to keep my speeds in check, I'm using cruise control a lot, but I'm always getting this beeping noise. Besides that though, this would be a fantastic highway cruiser. You get decent gas mileage. I'm pretty amazed at what mileage this thing gets, being all-wheel drive, having 8.7 inches of ground clearance, lifted way up. It's not a small wagon, and definitely not lightweight, but this gets pretty good fuel economy for the power, the size, the ride height. Alright guys, well that kind of sums up my thoughts on the new Outback. I think this is a pretty good buy if you're looking for a wagon, if you live in an area where you're going to be using this car's clearance, its capabilities. You know, you could throw a ton of stuff on this, take it on a road trip, and it's a pretty top choice. If you can live with the subpar infotainment and some of the little weird annoyances and beeps and distractions from this Outback, it's you know, everyone has different driving styles, everyone has different car usage habits. So, you know, maybe this is fine. These issues that I've outlined aren't a big problem for you or not a deal breaker. And if that's the case, this is a fantastic car otherwise. It's I'm glad that Subaru is still making this Outback. They're still selling like crazy, and in a field where not many other wagons are still being made. And yeah, this is a good buy for 2020. It's a continued evolution of the car. Wish they still offered it in a manual, but I understand if only a few % of buyers are opting for that as an option. Why even bother? So let's go into the sound test portion of this video. Let's go in and select our playlist if we can. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. guys, there you go. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.